What's up, friends? Welcome to episode 7 of the Utopia-ish podcast. I have an interesting episode for you today. I decided to share a live Q&A that I did on Reusch's Instagram with him. How this came about was I started following Reusch. He's a history teacher and a thought leader, and his platform is nuanced thought and effective discourse and productive conversations, and being able to have conversations with people you disagree with in a constructive way. So I started following him. I found him through Africa Brooke. I saw him post something and I didn't agree with what he said, so I left some comments. And I did it in a pretty civil way. I think that struck him. He responded, and I still wasn't very impressed with his responses. And so I mentioned to him at one point, like, oh, you probably don't have time to fully unpack this with me, but I think there's a lot here. And he said, oh, I'll circle back around if I have time. And I just decided to post a video where I sort of expressed some criticisms. And I acknowledged, I was like, this is a one-sided conversation. I don't think Reusch is going to be like watching this video, so I'm just going to make my points. And he ended up DMing me and telling me that he was at the airport and had some time to kill and watched my video. And he invited me to do a live Q&A on his channel with him to demonstrate how successful, effective, and civil conversations between people who don't agree can take place on social media. So we just did that on Friday, and I was really happy with how it turned out. Honestly, I thought that, oh, let's wait for that siren to go by. I thought that it was going to be just me asking him, more sirens, hello, I'm in New York. Oh, multiple trucks, okay. I thought it was going to be just me asking him questions about the argument that he'd been making and kind of lobbing my criticisms, but he ended up being really interested in my take on anti-capitalism because he's someone who is a supporter of capitalism. So we ended up having an awesome conversation that really ran the gamut of a lot of core components of my belief structure, what this podcast is about, what I'm writing my book about, etc. And I thought it was worth sharing that conversation here on this platform. So it's going to start with a little introduction by him, and then we're going to get into the conversation. I hope you guys enjoy. And one thing that is important to me about this conversation that I've been looking for more opportunities to do is, he's posing a lot of questions and concerns that he has about, how would we have a society that's not based on capitalism? I love answering questions. I love hearing what people's primary concerns are. So again, if you have questions, if you have concerns, if you have disagreements, please send them my way. I would love to address them. It really helps me figure out what to put in my book. It really helps me figure out what to say on this podcast. So without further ado, me and Reusch hashing it out on Instagram.
All right, I'm going live. Where this came from was weeks ago. I posted something about a lot of the critical social justice leaders like Robin DiAngelo and Ibram X. Kendi and people like that were making a lot of money. And they were also being hypercritical of capitalism. And that's one of the many things that I talked about as like an issue. And a woman named Allie made a video about the reasons why she didn't agree with that take. And, she put the time into, bringing up very valid points that I can only give so much. Like, Instagram is not made for nuance. So I'm trying to bring nuance to it, and it gets kind of sloppy. But because she made a video, I responded, and I was like, you know what, maybe this is an opportunity to kind of model what you can use Instagram for. This is social networking. Social networking. So we can be social together. And using this technology, I've linked my students in my classroom with kids who are, very diverse and different than them. There's so many awesome things that you can do with this technology. And unfortunately, we don't use it for that. And it's really a bummer. And that's kind of one of the big reasons why I'm here, is to see if we can scale education, but also to just model how you can connect with people that think differently than you and go in with an open mind to be like, all right, well, maybe we can work some of this out. So let me see if I can bring her in. I don't see any requests. Let me see. Here we go. Let's see if this will work. And I can't do this with everybody. Obviously, like 2 kids and all kinds of crazy stuff. But when I can, I would love to be able to do this. There you are. Hi, Allie.
Hi. Yeah, hi. I missed a little of your intro because I don't know how this works. So here I am.
No worries at all. No, I just kind of gave a little bit of background and just said that the aim is to try and, as I said a little bit in DMs, like model if there's disagreements that you have with someone, like just you can connect with them. This is an amazing technology where you can connect with them and try and work it out. And you might not always agree, but you can at least find some more understanding. So the topic originally was about capitalism and how people who are, I'm gonna try and like steelman kind of your position. So it's like people who can be anti-capitalist or very like critical of capitalism, but still partake in the system, something along those lines.
Yeah, although I have to say that when I went back to review your reel, it's possible that I misinterpreted the argument you were originally making anyway, because there were kind of 3 parts to it. It wasn't just they're getting speaking fees and they're anti-capitalists, but you also mentioned a frustration that they weren't engaging in debates.
That's by far the biggest, that their unwillingness to engage opposing viewpoints from people who are sincere in their criticisms and not looking to own them, not looking to make personal attacks, but just trying to talk about their ideas and highlight what they think might be wrong with their ideas. That's the idea of the academy, and that's my biggest issue.
Yeah, so I think to your point earlier about your reel, one of the challenges of this like medium is that it's hard to convey the argument that you're making in such a short period. So I'm really grateful that we have the opportunity to elaborate on what's being said.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So I kind of put it out there. It's almost like bait for people to start talking, maybe amongst themselves or whatever. And I can't do this all the time. You can't do this all the time. But like people can, they can engage just with some genuine curiosity and stuff. But I think it's still valuable to go into. I think that there's elements of things that you brought up that I think are very valid. So do you have any like specific questions about in general about that, or do you want to just like kind of get
I do.
Yeah,
I mean, originally I was going to ask you to go over what the argument you were making, but if you want to just jam with me on anti-capitalism and like participating in capitalism and as anti-capitalists, I mean, that's kind of my wheelhouse, so I'm down to talk about that.
Okay, so what is when you call yourself an anti-capitalist, do you think like top to bottom the idea of private ownership of businesses is wrong? Like what would kind of be like your kind of ideal when it comes to how to run a economic system?
Sure. I mean, my opinion is that any economic system or society that's built on competition as like a fundamental core necessity of the society is something that I'd like to see us evolve beyond, and that arguably didn't even exist until the last very like small fraction of human society. So I think for me, it's not as much as capitalism itself is my problem. It's competition-based societal structures, and capitalism just happens to be the one that we have going on.
Okay, can you help me understand this then? Because when I love the Einstein quote, if you want to understand anything, look deep into nature. So I love evolutionary biology because I'm like, okay, I had Franz de Waal on my podcast, who's like one of the top chimp experts. And we're like 98% chimps. So he's basically said in the podcast, he's like, when I go to a bar, I just see a bunch of chimps. Like we are animals. We're still animals, and we're still riding like 20,000-year-old genetics, basically. Just now we have iPhones and stuff like that. And nature is by its very nature, very competitive and cutthroat. So how do we, if you say evolve past that, how do we evolve? Is it dangerous? I used to surf, and if you would fight against the wave, you're going to lose. So are you advocating to some degree to fight against our evolution and our natural instincts?
So I think that the claim you just made is a really, really common conception. I don't want to immediately label it as a misconception, but there's a lot of really interesting anthropological work that's being done right now about like what human nature actually is.
Okay.
And, you know, the vast majority of what we colloquially understand as human nature was kind of disseminated by Victorian anthropologists who were interpreting evidence that they found through a lens that was very biased towards the culture that they were inside of. So I don't know if you're familiar with Christopher Ryan. He wrote Sex at Dawn. Have you read that?
Yes, a long time ago. Yeah.
So my argument is actually that there's a significant amount of evidence for the fact that, and this includes, so we it's not as simple as like we're chimps. Bonobos are actually even closer to us than chimps, and a lot of the research that was done on chimps was done under almost manufactured circumstances where like Jane Goodall and her team were providing food for the chimps that immediately recreated sort of agricultural types of you know, like one really concentrated amount of resources in a specific place that had like a specific limit to it. It actually recreated a lot of the phenomena that we see in human beings nowadays in an agricultural environment. But there's a significant amount of evidence for the claim that human beings, for the vast majority of our development, were fiercely egalitarian, and that cooperation was our primary survival mechanism. And so while I don't disagree that there is competition in nature, I think that the way you want to interpret the ecosystem and how nature interacts is as malleable as anything in history, where you could look at something and say that's competition, or you could look at something and say that's really in balance and that's really well regulated.
Yeah, so I mean, even societies that were egalitarian, it was within their tribe, though. I mean, there was always going to be that, like, it wasn't among everybody. You know, like, I don't know if you ever read Empire of the Summer Moon about the Comanche and stuff like that. Like, it was, there's all kinds of different things, but there was always like an us. We are tribal creatures, and that's another way that we evolved. Would you agree with that or no?
I don't actually. I don't agree with that. I'm sorry, you cut out a little. Can you tell me the name of the reading you were just suggesting? I'll definitely write it down.
Oh, Empire of the Summer Moon. It's about
Empire of the Summer Moon.
Yeah, it's about the Comanche tribe, which were like on the Great Plains, and just how, I mean, they were just
Right.
brutal, or, you know, I mean, just a lot of, you know, we have evolved. You know, I've read William von Hippel and Sapiens and stuff like that, and it's like we have evolved to be tribal, though. You don't think that that's true?
So there is a really important distinction that needs to be made. A lot of anthropologists will use cultures that aren't completely immediate return structures. So basically they have some form of food storage or some form of like those cultures do tend to gear a little bit more towards what agricultural cultures, like the sorts of competitive structures that they convey. At the same time, I would say that like when you start to get too much of a population, that's when you start, like, I can't say that the Comanche tribe in that book that you described is necessarily a good example to base an opinion of human nature off of, because it's based on a lot of fact. Like I said, like the chimps where Jane Goodall was interested, you know, there's a lot of different factors that can affect. So that's why I'm a big fan of, I'm a fan of Christopher Ryan's work, because he discusses a lot of the nuances in like what kinds of populations you're looking at. But I will say that arguably, again, like we don't know everything about prehistory. But I will say that there is significant evidence for the idea that there was really no war before agriculture, and that tribal people actually moved between bands freely. And so in some ways they were all like kind of one big people. So I don't know. I'm still doing my own research as well. I'm not going to say that the things that you're bringing into the conversation are absolutely wrong, but I do think that we've made a lot of assumptions about them that it's important to question.
Yeah, I mean, I love questioning everything. I get yelled at for asking questions. Someone asked, do you think that competition breeds innovation? And if you then do you have like examples of where innovation has occurred where there wasn't competition? Because I think we are tribal, but we're also collaborative. So I think that there's probably a double-sided, blade to this, where innovation can only occur through collaboration as well.
So I think that competition is a very good strategy for inciting innovation. I also think it's not the only or even the best strategy. And that's not to say that there can't be healthy competition in a society, but when competition is like absolutely necessary and it's the driving force of a society, I think that can actually create a lot more problems than it is benefiting us. So, for instance, in a society like capitalism where profit is ultimately the thing by which we measure who won the competition, then you get a lot of innovations that are really not serving us as a people, as opposed to if you could change the nature of the value system that's directing what we do, then we could cut out a lot of negativity. And also, okay, I had a little addition I wanted to make to that, which was, that I also don't believe that humans are inherently lazy. And so one thing that agriculture did for us is it increased the population enough that there could be enough like interaction for us to come up with things and start making innovations. But I think that the last point I'll make about that, I know I can be kind of long-winded sometimes, but I don't think that looking at the past I think we need to be really careful with how much we allow our understanding of the past to shape our vision for what's possible in the future.
Yeah, that's a mix. I'm with you. I mean, I actually am, I've always thought of myself as a progressive for that reason. But I found a lot of my gaps in my thinking were because I didn't understand as much about where we came from, which is why I became a history teacher and things like that, to look at the patterns of the past and then go, all right, but we can't solve the future's problems just from the past, but it can help us as a guide type of thing. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Is there like,
yeah. I'm sorry, wait, before you ask another question, can I throw out that you mentioned Einstein, and I'm not sure if you know this, but Einstein was a socialist and he wrote a wonderful paper called On Socialism. Have you read that?
I haven't, no.
Definitely check it out. I really recommend it. Yeah.
So would you consider yourself a socialist?
Not necessarily. I don't really find labels like that to be that helpful. I think we start to have conversations about what a label means instead of just actually having a conversation about like how to build a better society.
Yeah. So what would you say would be like major, if magic wand, you're in charge, like what would you say would be like some changes that you would want to implement when it comes to our economic system?
I mean, I'm a kind of big picture thinker. I think a part of my utopian worldview is that everyone has different skill sets. And those things combine together to make a beautifully well-rounded population of humans that can do a lot of stuff. So I'm a little less interested in immediate policy making and much more interested in visualizing like the big picture of what we're working towards. And I think that can influence policy making in a big way. But for me, I mean, the number one thing that I think is necessary and in many ways sufficient for having a better society is to change the core value of our society from a scarcity competition mindset to a cooperation, bettering humankind and the planet is like our primary focus for all of the things that we're doing. And everyone is entitled to a livelihood. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds because this is a whole worldview, but like that we are all equally entitled to enjoy the spoils of our civilization, and our primary focus is just like making the world a better place, and that's all we have to work towards.
So you think, okay, so just to try and understand this a little bit, so you think that we are all entitled to equal distribution of resources, but what if one individual, you read like Animal Farm, right? Like,
yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah, but like, like the draft horse does, if we're a hunter-gatherer society and two big strong people go out and get the elk and then two other people sit down and just get smoke drugs the whole time, should they, if they share that equally, won't that build elements of resentment and things like of that nature? Like,
If you are, so I definitely want to draw a distinction because if you are not contributing to the tribe at all, you will absolutely be shamed and ostracized. Like you will die, right? Nobody will want to share their elk with you. And I don't think that human beings are naturally lazy when they're provided with the opportunity to do work that maximizes their skills and interests and is purposeful. But it is the case, or arguably what some anthropologists have claimed, and in a lot of direct return hunter-gatherer societies, is that you don't have to do any specific kind of work. You don't have to do any specific amount of work. You can choose whether you want to work that day. You can choose what you want to do. But there's a huge amount of like my insurance policy against potentially not like getting an elk tomorrow is sharing my elk today. And so there's almost this sort of overarching sense of like, I might be contributing more today, but you might be contributing more tomorrow. And there's a great quote from Civilized to Death, which is a book by Christopher Ryan I'm reading right now. Sorry, you guys. I'm reading it as research for my book, where there's an African bush person told his wife that the best place for his extra elk was in his friend's stomach. Like that's the best storage place.
right. So in that, so I guess what I'm trying to get at is like, we all have something to contribute to society, but we don't have equal amounts to contribute. Some people contribute more, right? Like some people, their skill might be in something that's less valuable for raising the tide to raise all ships. You know, someone who creates a solar panel that's going to change our energy needs forever, that's going to be, let's say, more valuable than someone who's, you know, excellent at playing a video game or something along those lines. So how do we make sure, because I'm with you in we want to advance as a people, and one of the things I tell my students is like, get on it, go out, build stuff, pursue entrepreneurial ventures, because there's nothing better, I wouldn't think, to a young person as an aim to, you could become a billionaire making the world a significantly better place for everybody. But that, I guess, and that's not what happens. A lot of them want to just go on Wall Street, become investment bankers, where you gamble person A's money on person B's labor, you take a cut of that, and then you don't really have stake in the game. I'm guessing you're against that, as I am, but I worry that if you can throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, if you level it out, then you don't get the people who actually want to make the world a better place and scale it to to like something bigger, because they might not be incentivized to work for it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. You know, well, this is a big conversation and you're asking a question that really is on the precipice of one of the most difficult to swallow parts of like my belief system and what I think is the foundation of this. But I'm trying to think what way to enter my answer to that, because it's very faceted. But I will say this: what drives people to want to join Wall Street or play video games as a job is living in a society that values profitability and provides opportunities to make a big profit in ways that do not benefit society. If we were living in a society where the core purpose of any work you could do to actually contribute to that society is inherently beneficial to society, and where we're all socialized in an environment where that's what we value, then those things would not be an issue, right? Like if you are socialized in an education system and a culture that the way you're raised is to go, okay, what are your skills and interests? What can you do? The most important thing about our society is like making the world a better place. You won't make those, like, you won't even have those choices to make. Like playing video games will not be a job. Wall Street won't be a job that you can have. It's, you know, so video games could be like a hobby you could have. So that's my short answer to that part. But the other part I want to talk about is the idea that valuing some jobs more than others is like a really well ingrained value that's deeply embedded with capitalism. So it's like, yeah, people, for instance, think that being a doctor is more valuable than being a carpenter because it requires more education. But that's based in a time when education was a very scarce resource, which is no longer relevant, right? And so it was much harder to become a doctor. There were much fewer and far between. Meanwhile, we fucking need people, we need people who can build houses. We need people who can take out the garbage, you know, like, and so that's back to Einstein. That Einstein quote, sorry, I'm very impassioned right now. I don't mean to yell at you. That Einstein quote where he says, don't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, is directly targeted at the fact that the society within which we're living now values only a very narrow subset of human abilities. But if we're living in a society where getting to do what you love, even if what you love is like manual labor that involves no intellectualism and all you have to do is like farm or take out the garbage or whatever, weld things, if that is like valued just as much as any other job, then everyone gets to do their part. Like, do you understand what I'm saying? I don't think I need to elaborate anymore.
No, I actually, well, I teach now at a private school where a lot of kids are going to, fancy colleges and want to get into, law or finance or something like that. And what I tell them is like, I believe it's still true. The average salary for a plumber in America is higher than the average salary for a lawyer. And I know someone I grew up with who's an underwater welder, and he makes like $150,000 a year as a welder. I mean, the more that people are becoming, I guess, more and more like, soft. And like, I was changing a tire one time in the Hollywood Hills and people were like, oh my gosh, how do you have that skill? It's like, oh no, like people have these skills. Then the people who fix air conditioners and heating and plumbers, they're going to become more and more valuable, the less and less skills that people have. So I guess what I'm saying is with value is skills. Do you have skills that you can help someone with? Someone mentioned in the comments here about, you're paid for your contribution or your service to someone else. If you're not actually serving anyone else, then you don't get paid. I don't think that's always the case, but I think that should be the aim for our system. And anything that doesn't do that, I want positive sum games, and anything that is going to be a negative sum where your wealth is coming at someone else's expense. I think that's something that we can try to improve upon and try and make it more positive sum. But yeah, I think skills is what it comes down to. And I want to encourage young people to go gain skills, because if you have skills, then you can get more money. And some people just don't have skills. They're not able to do very many things. And then how much can you contribute to the so-called tribe?
Well, but part of the reason why a lot of people don't have skills is that a lot of the skills that the vast majority of people could do, it's not just that whether or not they're monetarily they're compensated, but it's also about status and pride, and so you might be a plumber or an underwater welder, but like if you're not like intellectual enough to go and get an intellectual job, what I mean? It's sort of, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, Kajal. I'm just saying I hate that stuff. I don't buy into that. I understand
that you don't, but this is the thing. Yeah. How do we, we definitely need to decide whether we're talking about like ideal scenario or like daily life today, right? Because I agree with you, but to me, it sounds like what you're doing is you're encouraging your students to have a mindset that actually doesn't really mesh with the culture that we're living in, with the way that we value people. We're asking because we're asking people to, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious, when you say like value people, like I value my plumber. If I have a leaky pipe and there's brown water spraying over, I want to see him more at the door than anyone else. Like we value, I mean, I don't even know how much we value my friends on Wall Street. I have friends that work on Wall Street. They get hated on pretty openly by a lot of people. Now you say value as far as money goes. Is that what you mean? Do you mean like as far as like?
No, what I mean is societal messaging, status.
What? But you
know what I mean?
Generally, like American society values someone working on Wall Street than like a laborer?
Absolutely.
Really?
And that's not, well, and we can discuss what we mean by value, because obviously if they're getting paid the same, the valuation is the same. But I think that we're raised with a socialization that says you're inherently less worthy, you're inherently less respected if you are a manual laborer than you are if you're a person working in finance. So, and that's something kids grow up with that, and they're like, I don't want to feel less worthy. I don't want to be looked down on. And that's also tied into advertising, which is an intrinsic part of capitalism, where like we're constantly being made to feel like we're not enough unless we have all of the things that the salary of a finance bro can buy.
Yeah, I think that there's, I guess I don't know. I guess maybe we do look at like people. Oh, they have money, so they're like, you know, more valuable in society. But there's a lot of hate for those people too, and it's a weird thing because
Yeah.
it really depends on where you come from. My wife is from the Philippines. She came here with like nothing. There were 10 of them in a 1-bedroom apartment, and she's worked really hard to start a business. She does like cosmetic stuff, and she grew a pretty big business, and now she employs 35 women from all over the country, all over the world now, and her whole thing is to try and help beauty business like entrepreneurs like to grow their business. And these are a lot of girls, like some of her employees are like used to be on the pole and like stuff like that. Like there was a lot of people that were looked down on society, and it's like, well, let's play in this game. It kind of goes back to how this started, which is like, okay, well then how do you get welcome? My whole family tree is like white, college educated, like the whole thing. And then brown girl, and she's not college educated, and she's like, okay, well the way that I'm gonna get accepted is by making money. Like that's the way that they'll accept me. But it's interesting because she made it in the beauty business, and she, you know, had like fake boobs and big nails and stuff like that, that she was still looked down upon. It didn't matter that she had a lot of money; it was still looked down upon. So I understand what you're saying, but I also don't. I think that that's because partially, maybe I'm just kind of riffing, but maybe that's because we're so comfortable now in 2022 in a lot of ways that we don't value these people who can actually keep the lights on. But once the lights get shut off, God forbid, then we're going to value those people who can actually turn the lights on. You know, the people who can.
I don't disagree. I mean, I think it's interesting. I think at a certain point we have to discuss like the proverbial we, like of whom are we speaking? You know, because yeah, I think what you've mentioned a couple of times, this thing about like we're getting soft and are we going to be able to turn the lights on? And I recently read this wonderful book. I would be very curious to hear your thoughts on this book, honestly. Have you heard of Fully Automated Luxury Communism by Aaron Bastani?
I haven't.
Effectively, none of it is about what fully automated luxury communism is about. It's all about automation and the future of work. And, you know, one of the things that, and to be honest, I'd like to backtrack a little and kind of try to understand, like, what argument you are making about capitalism, where you think that the things you want to change about the jobs people are choosing and the way we value people, like, how do you think we can, like, how do you think capitalism is the ideal path forward in order to do that? But the side note is that, no, I went on that path. That's the path I chose. Go ahead.
I'm okay with like government jobs programs. My worry about someone's gonna have to keep the system going. So it's either gonna be the collective, which kind of works its way through the government.
Oh, are you talking about fully automated luxury communism right now?
What's that?
I'm just trying to figure out what part of what I said you're responding to, because I didn't mention government programs.
Oh no! Oh, just you said about how we advance, and is capitalism the best route?
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So I think it's the most that aligns from my understanding of like our evolution and stuff like that. But what I worry about, someone's going to have to run it, and I think the more that it becomes communal, the more communal it becomes, and not the more authoritarian it becomes, I think the better. And Alexis de Tocqueville, when he wrote Democracy in America, came to America and was looking for, like, why is this small new country thriving so much? And he went to Washington, D.C., and he's like, I bet this is where all the people who are in charge are. And it wasn't. It was small communities. And even minority communities. I'm like now big in the Filipino community, but like, I taught in Black communities and Hispanic communities and Jewish communities. Like, when the communities come together and they look out for one another, that seems to be the best way to advance. So I think the ideal would be to have communities working with each other and less of the government in charge. Because I do worry, I'm in California, and I worry about the way that government handles other people's money is not efficient. You handle your money a lot better than you handle money that's just given to you. And I think that we are extremely wasteful. And I worry about the wastefulness of that when the community grows beyond, let's say, like Dunbar's number or something like that. Like when it goes beyond a few hundred people. Like a kibbutz works in Israel, they work, but once you get too big, then just like you said that quote where like the best place for my extra meat is in my friend's stomach, right? It's not a stranger's stomach, it's in your friend's stomach. And I think that when it becomes a stranger's stomach, you're less likely to say, all right, I'm gonna go put it in a stranger's stomach because maybe my friend's gonna need it. There's something along those lines.
Sure, but also I'm not sure when that book was written. I know what you're talking about, Dunbar's number. I'm not sure, like, when did that theory come out?
About Dunbar's number?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I've heard it from a bunch of biologists talk about how that's a thing. I've never.
I'd be very curious. It is a thing in egalitarian pre-agricultural societies that once the band gets to a certain number, they fracture and they become more than one band. But so I would just say that I think we're entering into a new paradigm of the information age now that can change a lot about what it means to be a stranger. But also that thing about the stranger is primarily, it's a lot of that also is based on competitive and scarcity centered economics.
Right.
I want to backtrack to what you were saying though. Is it fair to characterize what you just said as, are you assuming that the alternative to capitalism is where the government controls all of the distribution and all of the...
Well, I think it would be a sliding scale. I think it would be from, like anarchism, no government at all, to some government programs, police departments, fire departments, whatever, all the way up to, all businesses are government run, some sort of communist system. So I think that, it's a sliding scale. And I like having a fire department. I like having public schools.
Right.
But my problem with the public schools is largely that a great teacher gets the same amount of resources as the terrible teachers who have movie day every day. And I think that I've seen so many people, and just in my field, who were great teachers, and then the incentive was gone, whether it was monetary or it was the willingness to try outside the box. The reason I had to leave public schools, I was like, let me teach my way. They're like, nope, you have to teach this way, and limiting that freedom. So I think I'm glad that there's some. I'd be for certain bigger jobs programs and stuff like that, but I would want them to be well regulated so the government doesn't act in wasteful ways. I want to be as efficient as possible because you talk about scarcity. Sorry, but talk about scarcity, and our resources are scarce. So we have far more wants and needs than we do available resources. So we have to make trade-offs. So how do we do that? And I think the best way is to innovate to make better use. I think that we can, create desalination plants, and we can, use alternative energy sources and stuff like that. But that's going to take a big investment and a lot of smart people, a lot smarter than me, to come up with those things.
Okay, so there is always this dance in a conversation like this where we're talking about what's a practical thing we can think about for the immediate future of our society versus I am a big advocate for really big picture thinking as a way to think outside the box in the immediate future. And so I want to start by saying that I don't believe that it is a linear spectrum between capitalism and communism, right? I think there's an infinite number of potential directions we could go, or maybe not infinite, but at least within our understanding of human nature, we could look, like you were talking about community governance, we can look at styles of government that are not even really related to democracy as we understand and know it. So I think it's just really important to question the assumptions we're making about what possibilities there are as alternatives to what we currently have, because I think when we're thinking about implementing governing or implementing community services in the immediate future, how can we think about this in a way where we're not going, okay, how far towards communism do we want to go, but actually where we're going what's actually going to be effective and practical?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, agreed. I mean, but the attempts at those, you recognize the atrocities of Maoist China, Soviet Union, et cetera, right? So like what would you, let's do short term. Like what would be something that you think we could implement today to move us closer to where you think would be better off for us as a society?
Sure. Okay, there is one. I do want to eventually circle back to push on the claim you made about how scarce our resources are. I would like to talk about that because I don't think that's true, actually. I think that capitalism imposes false scarcity on our resources, and they're actually significantly more abundant than we have the infrastructure to acknowledge. But I will just say that I don't know the answer to the question you just asked me, because I don't think that way. And so what I'm looking to do is I think about, okay, what's the big picture? And then I can have conversations with maybe you, I don't know how you identify, or other people who can go, okay, if we're thinking big picture, what would the ideal human society look like? Then they're able to think, okay, what could we do next that would iterate us closer to that? And because I don't, that's not really my forte. I'll definitely think about it, but I think for me, if we can't even discuss what really is possible without the cynicism, unfounded, in my opinion, cynicism that comes from looking at things like failed communist governments and stuff, like we need to be having the conversation about whether those things are actually really what we think they are, and whether they really limit possibilities for us as deeply as we imagine that they do, because I don't think that they do.
Okay. Yeah. Perhaps. What did you? I want to let's go to the scarcity, the part. You don't believe that resources are scarce?
Not particularly. I mean, I wouldn't. There are some resources that are scarce, but for instance, like one of the big things is
Housing?
Go ahead.
Housing?
Oh, well, housing, the only reason housing is scarce is because, look, profit is the problem, right? Housing would not be scarce if we didn't have to worry about capitalism. If the only thing driving building housing was everybody does a job that makes the world better and we need some builders and we need some materials, like let's get some sustainable materials and build some houses for some people, that would not be a problem. The reason things are scarce is because the people with the money don't want to pay for them, right? Like we have enough food to feed every single person on the planet. We don't, because capitalism. We don't have enough minerals to create sustainable energy for everyone, but we will soon, and so we could use those minerals to create sustainable energy in some, like it's just like if we didn't have to worry about what we could economically support under capitalism, then we wouldn't have this problem.
I get, but what I'm saying is, like, if you look at somewhere like Mumbai or something in India, where people are just stacked on top of each other, there's far more people than we have space. Like you have space in your room, I have space in this room. Like, if we want to give people some breathing room, how do we do that? I mean, look at places like San Francisco and stuff, which are pretty progressive places, but like are you saying like they put limits on you can't build more high rises and things like that to like?
I am not an expert in the actual details of this, but I will say that it would be significantly easier to find a solution to the question you're asking if we didn't have to worry about the restrictions of capitalism. Like if we could all just band together and be like, hey, where can we move these people to? We don't have to worry about, country borders or anything like that. Let's just find some land that's not going to be problematic to build on and make some houses, or let's not build 15-room mansions. I think there's probably a number of solutions. I don't know what they are, but I imagine we would make much more. Capitalism is imposing a lot of scarcity on this problem.
So in what, because I think the idea of like a really like unrestricted capitalism is there's no restrictions. You can do whatever you want, but you're saying that some people have so many resources that they take it away from other people. I'm not following.
I'm talking about mostly governments and corporations.
Huh?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was cutting you off. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, are you saying that it's because so many resources, like Pareto's distribution, like so many resources are concentrated in such a small number of people?
I mean, think about how much, it's not that, it's we're wasting a lot of resources. We're throwing a lot of resources away. We're throwing away a lot of food. We are not engaging in sustainable, for instance, getting sustainable building materials would potentially be a lot easier to do if all of the people who were invested in lumber could just like turn all of their energy to, you know, it's like it's hard for us to train. There are lobbyists and all different kinds. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I agree with you. How do you incentivize them to do that? Like, how? Because Elon Musk, when he was building Tesla for renewable energy stuff, he was everyone in the automotive industry tried to stop him. Everyone in the oil industry tried to stop him. So he had to really push really hard to make this car that's awesome to do it. But yeah, I mean, the reason why, like in San Francisco, there's such a homeless problem here in LA is not because of the capitalists, because the government restricts you from doing that. I can't put a shelter in my backyard. It's illegal for me to put a shelter in my backyard to house someone who's homeless in my town. So shouldn't we get rid of that?
I completely agree we should get rid of that. I don't think, though, that the existence of that law means there's no capitalism involved in that problem at all. I think they're very, you know, there are a lot of different, but I also would be curious if we looked into the origins of that law, why that exists. You know, like I'm very curious.
A lot of it's like aesthetics, you know, a lot of it's that kind of stuff. Like I think
just capitalism, right? Can you sell, is this property more or less valuable based on the aesthetics?
Yeah, because people want to have a house that looks nice. People want, you know, jewelry. They want to look. They want things to look nice. And if you go to somewhere where that is severely limited, where you can't build the house that you want to have because of, you know, the society needs of those who have not, then you know, maybe you won't have as meaningful of a life, because those things do bring you meaning. You know, having nice things do bring people meaning. I'm not saying that even if they're not, but you know, some dudes like watches and some ladies like, you know, purses and stuff like that. But that stuff would be more likely to go away, right? In like an ideal society for you?
Not at all. Not in my opinion.
So you think it can have all, like we can house all the homeless and have all of the people with their Rolls Royces, we can have it all?
100%. I will say this. Okay. I think it's very difficult to envision what kinds of things people would want when we're not living in a society that's socializing us to want certain things in order to give us a sense of value. So I do believe that, you know, maybe we would have fewer people who desire gigantic mansions that they don't need. I think that there would be a little bit of a temperance on people just indulging in luxury in excess. That being said, like, so I think it's very important to deconstruct like what parts of society are driven by capitalist values around like what we want. I do believe we can have like fully luxury society where everyone is equal, because people are diverse enough that they want different things, especially when they're not being convinced by society to want a very narrow collection of things. And that collection of things is what's going to demonstrate to everyone else in society that you're a person of value. You know, I think there's a lot more individuation that could come in when, for instance, you're living in an area where there's a local guy who's the architect of your immediate community, and you get to work one-on-one with him to build a house that perfectly suits your needs and your tastes. And also, to harken back to the egalitarian society days, taking a lot for yourself is a shaming and blaming situation. Like, you, in the same way that we're socialized to want to express our status through accumulation of material wealth, in a society where that's not the value we're socialized with, that the message that sends becomes very different. And then people it's much more about expressing your authenticity than it is about establishing your status. Does that make sense? That was a lot. This is a lot.
Yeah, I think the status stuff, I'm not really big into statusy stuff, but I do like certain like luxury things, like I get like good supplements and stuff because I'm into health, you know, or if I want to get like an NAD injection, that's like $1,000. That's a lot of money, but it makes me feel better and I can be healthier so I can be there for my kids. Like, I have a crazy medical.
It doesn't have to be expensive. Sorry.
No, I love the idea I love the idea of we can kind of have it all, but just as an economic, I wonder, like, you know, who's going to clean up the shit? You know what I mean? Like, who's going to do that? Are they going to be paid, you know, to just clean up garbage? Are they going to get paid the same as the person that creates the iPhone? Then why even spend the amount of time? I just met with a former student of mine who's he's doing like energy stuff, and he went to school, went to Columbia, and he works ungodly hours. He's 22, 23 years old, and he works something like 95 hours a week, just grinding, you know, 8 a.m. to midnight every single day to try and make something cool in tech. But he was doing it to make a lot of money. And will people be willing to work that hard to do something like that without the access resources that work brings you?
They won't have to. Okay, so this conversation is really like, it just fulfills me. I love it so much because, so I understand this is like really outside of what we normally are discussing when we're talking about our society, when we're talking about our economy. So I don't want to blow your mind, but the ideal version of this I'm talking about, there's no money. You don't get paid.
Right.
So it's not like you're doing hours in exchange for money. It's significantly more back to the way it was in egalitarian times, where you're socialized with a drive to do something that benefits your society, and you're allowed to opt in to whatever degree of that you want. And so, and there's a little bit of cultural expectation that, like, you know, we can tell if you're like a fucking slacker or not. But some people are also, everybody is different. And so it is really important to acknowledge that some people will work 12 hours a day anyway, just because that's how their personality is, and other people won't. I think the thing you brought up, that's a question I've thought about a lot, and I think is really valid. I think there are a lot of jobs we think of as being not appealing, that more people would be willing to do in a society where we really raise people with the sense that whatever you want to do is just as valuable as what anybody else wants to do. And if you want to work with your hands and you want to that's fine. I think, since you brought up underwater welder is an example I actually have used when I think about this, because I also had a friend who was an underwater welder. I think underwater welders will probably be people who are like adrenaline junkies, who just like want a dangerous job. However, I do think it's possible that there could be an extra reward system for people who are doing jobs that are really not enjoyable, or there could be some kind of rotation system where everyone, like, there are some countries where you like have to be in the military for a little while. There might be something like you have to do this job or that job. But I've also seen videos of janitors and garbage people living under capitalism right now who love what they do. You know, and so I think there absolutely is a diversity of people, that the vast majority of jobs there are to do, someone will be fulfilled by that job and care about that. Like, I watched this beautiful video of this janitor who was like, I love making this school a safe space for the students and making it clean.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. I was a custodian my sophomore year in college. I went to night school and I was
Oh, sorry if I'm not using the politically correct term. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. I mean, janitor, custodian, like, I didn't like it, you know, and all the guys I worked with are just like, yeah, this job sucks, but it was kind of what I needed to do. You know, I'm not from wealth or anything like that, so like I needed to do that to pay my way through college. And I think that if you can find the thing that you love working hard at, that's the thing I tell my students every day is, like, you know, find the thing that you love working hard at, and then you'll eventually get paid for it. You'll eventually get a lot of fulfillment from that. A lot of people don't know what that is, but it's easier to find what I love doing this. I love having conversations with, you know, different people. I love teaching kids. Like, I really love teaching way more than I loved. I was a landscaper. I framed houses for a little bit. I was a custodian. I was a driver. I did valet parking. All those jobs were fucking terrible. I don't want to do those anymore. And I'm guessing that people would rather do this. People would rather, you know, teach kids or something like that than you know, I had to pull gum out of urinals. That's not fun, you know, but someone has to pull gum out of urinals. Someone has to do those really dirty, hard jobs. And I don't know if the people doing them necessarily want to. I think they do it out of necessity. You know, most of the people who are doing hard labor jobs do it out of necessity. Some like it and they find joy in it because it's able to provide for their family. But I think most of them would much rather be yoga instructors or something like that. I just wonder how we're going to get people to do the really dirty jobs that are going to be necessary for this utopian society without, you know, without like forcing them into or in some way or another, which is, I guess with capitalism, would be like, if you don't work this, then you're going to be without resources. I don't know how to do it. That's all.
Well, that's okay, because the thing I tell people all the time is we don't have to have all the answers. We don't have to write down the manifesto of utopia and know the details of everything, right? A lot of it is trial and error. But we do need to be thinking significantly more expansively with a possibility mindset about what kind of society we could live in, you know? And I do want to go back again to what you were saying about work that people do, because the other post-scarcity thing is automation. And capitalism makes it like one of the really important arguments in fully automated luxury communism is that we actually are like on the brink of a point where our technology is going to make the lack of scarcity so inevitable that we actually won't be able to maintain capitalism unless we impose like a really unnatural amount of scarcity on resources. And so it is very important that we start thinking about like, what would a post-capitalism world look like? Because, for instance, it's insane right now that we can't even let robots do our jobs, because then the people whose jobs get taken over by robots don't get their basic needs met. Why can't we make less of some kinds of work?
Yeah, I mean, that's like definitely an economics question. You know, I'm on board with having an aim, like even if it's a high aim, it seems like a high aim. I'm down with having an aim for it, but then we have to kind of reverse engineer it and go, okay, what's the first step? What's the next step? Let's work our way towards a place where we can have this situation where everyone feels meaningful, you know, a purpose in their life, and they feel valued in society. And I think that what you can do on an individual level is show value to those people. You know, I really try my best to model my students, my children, you know, everyone, no matter what station in life they're in, to show them, you know, equal respect as a human being. I don't respect everyone's decisions equally and things like that, or behavior, but as a human being, you know, showing them, you know, that like sincere respect for what they do, because I do think that everyone is a part of a gear of this crazy society, as terrible as things are happening with, you know, shootings and things like that. Also, you know, that horrible day where those children were shot in Texas, 70 million students went to school and weren't killed. And that's incredible too. And, you know, we have problems with our society. And I don't like a lot of the way that this is going, as far as like, with the wealth transfer and stuff like that after COVID, but we're doing okay too. So I think we have to make incremental changes to try and improve. Let me ask you just real quick, like the idea of like, having like a technological, very automated communist system. Will there be someone in charge? I guess that's the question. Like, who would be in charge of this? Is there a hierarchy still? Because that's always been the concern with communism, is the pigs in Animal Farm. You know, to maintain it, they had to use force. So how are you going to get everyone on board, or will there be a hierarchy in kind of your ideal utopian?
So to clarify, I'm not a communist.
Yeah.
And my utopia is not communism. I did mention Fully Automated Luxury Communism, a book by Aaron Bastani, and sometimes when I mention that, people start to think I'm advocating for communism, which I'm not doing.
Okay.
I will say this: when we are embracing human diversity and we're valuing all positions equally, and we don't see leadership, like for instance in pre-agricultural immediate return egalitarian societies, leadership is something you get because everybody thinks that you're the best at it. You know, yes. It's not a power struggle. They're just like, yeah, we want to follow you.
The best
and it doesn't become, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I said the best and the brightest stuff.
It doesn't become this thing where they're like, wow, you're in power. It doesn't become this power struggle. So I do think leadership is a quality that many human beings have, and there absolutely will be healthy hierarchy. I think hierarchy is a very natural part of needing to organize and have infrastructure. I just think the nature of power and hierarchy and leadership will be very different. But I do want to backtrack and just kind of respond and like my point about what you were saying about figuring out what to do now. I will say that, like, I think these conversations and what you're doing is a huge part of the process of moving towards a better world for everyone, because you know, how, like, in my opinion, my contribution is the dissemination of ideas, right? I'm thinking about this. I'm in a position of privilege enough to think about this at this level of granularity and depth that, like, I'm writing a book. I mean, it requires people in positions of privilege who aren't scrounging for their next paycheck to be able to think about these things and share these ideas. And many ideas from authors long ago are now colloquial assumptions that we all have in our society. So this is super important. I do believe that the march towards progress in many ways is education, which is what you do, right? It's disseminating these ideas, socializing ourselves, and then we change the society, and then the society changes us, and we change the society. And it's so, while I don't have answers about policy right now, I do have answers about individual contributions. And I think we're in a phase of our development as a species where we as individuals in the information age are taking it upon ourselves to teach people things. And I think one of the most important themes I've seen come up is the idea of self-worth, right? I think that really socializing our society into having more self-worth will help a lot of the things that you seem to be wanting to change. But anyway, short story long, that's my soapbox about, like, what we're doing and the impact that it has.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for jumping on here, making that video, kind of calling me out. I know it wasn't like a call out, but like in some ways, and it brings up, like, the importance of nuance. And I don't know how, I think at the very least, like, I just understand the way that you think. I'm sure there's a lot of other people that think like that. You know, you and I align on a lot of things about the harms of capitalism. Probably we differ on, like, the way we see the benefits of capitalism. I think we both don't like the wastefulness of so many people. We don't like the way that certain members of society are looked down upon, even though they're very hardworking, skilled individuals. So I love always looking at, like, the trunk of the tree. You know, Allie, you and I have a trunk of a tree where we align on a lot of things, and we're going to disagree on some branches. You know, and some of your branches go kind of, they're a little out there, you know? And it's like, yeah, well, there's out there thinkers that have done some amazing things too. So I want to thank you for coming on here. I'm going to post this on my feed. People can share it and things like that, and I'll tag you. And you're willing to talk to people and things like that. So I want to encourage other people, just always with respect, to engage with you as well.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm really looking forward to continuing to to hear more about your ideas for how to make the world a better place, because I think we agree on that.
Yes. Yep. So we're shoulder to shoulder. We're moving forward, trying to figure this whole thing out. So thank you, Allie.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for joining, guys.
Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I had a blast doing it. If you're new to this podcast, you can follow me on social media at Allie Jessing, ALLIEJESSING. You can read my writing and follow my newsletter at alliejessing.com. You can listen to more episodes of this podcast on any major podcasting platform, and you can watch the video version of this podcast on YouTube. And I'm also going to start posting transcripts of this podcast on my blog, which is at my website. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.